The title of this talk is Don't Stand So Close to Me, Post-coronial Reflections in the Light of the Haptic Approach. So the title, as you see, it's a kind of joke of different kinds. Don't Stand So Close to Me, of course, is the famous song by the Police group in the 90s, I think. This is a song by the early 90s, if I am right, or late 80s. And also this new expression, post-coronial studies, post-coronial reflection, instead of post-colonial studies. Now we are facing with tons and tons of people that write papers, books, make conferences, make projects in the light of the COVID-19. I think that this is this is something ambiguous as usual, because it is something that may have some interest, but at the same time, when we are very fast in giving sentences and in giving interpretation of the present, of what is actually happening, we risk to say really superficial things or things that can change the day after tomorrow. And we have already seen this, as you notice, in the last week, in the newspaper, in the magazine, in the journals. The COVID-19 news are not anymore in the front page, which is, of course, it's a good news, because it means that the cases are decreasing, but it gives you also the feeling of how much all this is unpredictable, and the only certainty is unpredictability. People were talking just 1 month ago about dystopic scenarios in the future, about radical changes of everything. And if we walk in a street today of a big city in Italy, or also in other countries, but let's remain in Italy now, well, we don't have the impressions that has been a radical change, an epoch, something that is really epochal transformation. Well, if we don't, well, beyond the masks, if we don't look at the masks, most of the things that we see are the same than before. So this is quite interesting. I mean, my premise, that is the answer to the subtitle, is the social distance. The title of the conference, I already told you, the subtitle was, is the so-called social distancing that seems to become the new global habit for the next years. And this is something that I wrote 1 month ago, seems to become the new global habit for the next years. Are we sure about that? I'm not sure anymore. Okay, affecting the haptic approach of the ecological knowledge, is physical distance a loss in any case? I would argue that is not. It will depend on many factors. Humanity owns potentialities to cope with it in different manners. So the idea was, please be quiet, be very attentive in expressing sentences about the future, because we don't know really what's happening next month. So it depends. Nothing is certain. And I just want to give you a first point of suggestion that is the following. The rhetoric of total change and the brand new thing, or something totally new is happening, we are going to change everything, all this rhetoric discourse is intrinsically consumeristic and tied to financial capitalism. So sometimes people that say that are against consumism and the financial capitalism and the consumistic society, they are at the same time using the same mindset when they speak at every step of total change, of something that is going to change our life forever, and all this. So be very slow and attentive in all this, because what we are seeing in these last days, these last weeks, it gives us different possibilities, and I would not be totally surprised if in 2 months most of the humanity has almost forgot about this pandemic, about the coronavirus. Well, I'm not sure about that, but I take it as a possibility, okay? So this is the premise that I wanted to make. In this period, I reflected a lot on this expression, social distancing, social distance, and some of you have noticed that some scholars rightly corrected this expression with a different one. And they said, well, we are not talking about social distance, we are talking about physical distance. Physical distance and social distance are two different concepts. What we have been faced to in these 2 months is more a physical distance. But what is a distance, what is a sociality, and what is physical proximality? These are some questions that I have been thinking a lot during these months, and I would like to share with you some ideas. And I want to start from a sentence that I'm sharing with you on the screen. I want to share you this sentence. They are casting their problems at society. And you know, there's no such thing as society. There are individual men and women, and there are families. And no government can do anything except through people, and people must look after themselves first. It is our duty to look after ourselves and then also to look after our neighbors. Well, who is the author of this shocking sentence, no? But very famous sentence. As you are moderator, maybe you can see also these slides. I don't know, it was supposed to be a surprise, but the author of this very famous sentence was told in 1987 is Margaret Thatcher, Prime Minister of Great Britain for many years, one of the most influential politician of the second part of the 20th century, and one of the very famous supporter of liberal capitalism and the ideology of competition, meritocracy, and capitalism, of course. So I have highlighted some words in this sentence. There is no such a thing as society. There are individual men and women, and there are families, individual families, and people must look after themselves first. So this is a clear example of a paradigm that was the most popular paradigm of our capitalistic age, the Western model of capitalism. It is the paradigm of the individuality as prior to society, and to put it in the vocabulary that I used to work with in my courses and in my classes, and many students are here, so they know what I'm talking about. It is the network theory of interconnected points. There are individuals first, and the reality of society, according to Thatcher, is just a fictitious reality, because reality is just the sum of individuals, and there are families, of course, and people has to look after their families and their neighbor. This is all that we have to do. So this is a paradigm of isolation. In principle, I am isolate. If I want, I can take care of the others, of my family, of people close to me. It is the ideology of accumulation, and it is the ideology of distance. Okay, so what is distant from me? I'm not concerned, but it's something. It's not because in the Thatcher view we are bad and we are evil, but just because what is too far from us, it's out of our caring and control. All we can do is control families and the neighbors. So society does not exist. And in this coronavirus time, one of the most widespread discourse was that we were constrained to social distancing, in the sense that we were isolated. We were forced to be isolated. We were forced to be alone. On the opposite side of this ideology, there is the apparent opposition. I want to highlight that is apparent opposition. It's an apparent opposite side. That is the rhetoric of physical proximity. The fact that when people are physically jointed together, we are in a situation that is the opposite of isolation. So we are together. We are, in a certain way, a society. We are in relation. Well, it would be quite easy to show that this idea of physical proximity, so many individuals that gather together in places and share time together, it is just in the same framework of capitalistic accumulation and isolation model. In other words, it does not suffice to be physically together for not being alone. This is something that I say to explain what I mean by haptic approach, and we will return on this in a few minutes. But haptic approach is not physical proximity and physical contacts per se. Otherwise, a crowd in a stadium or in discos or in pubs would be the top and the apex of haptic experience. But haptic experience is something different. It's just not being together. And as you very easily understand, a crowd in a disco or in a stadium or other kind of situation, it is totally immersed in the logic of capitalistic society, of liberal society, of a society where people spend their free time in some leisure moments, but very often they are alone nevertheless. So, clarify that, the point is, can we be apart without being alone? So this is something that I experienced during these months. The experience of being apart, because I was isolated in my apartment like all of you, maximum with some members of the family for some people, and other people were totally alone. So the idea was I am alone or alone with the family, the Thatcher model, and the rest of the world is outside. But can we think of an experience of this apartness that is not an experience of loneliness? And on the contrary, we have already said that we can be physically together and be fully alone. So I think that we can be apart without being alone. And this is one of the beautiful challenges that these Corona times gave us. In the sense that we can, and I hope that all of you took the opportunity to develop some new skills and sensibilities in this direction. The feeling of being apart can also increase the intensity of interdependence and the feeling of interconnection, the fact that we are always connected, opposite to what Mrs. Thatcher said. Of course, this is not assured. We have to approach the thing in a specific way. And this is why I think that the haptic approach comes to help. There is another sentence that I want to share with you, which is this one. What is hapticality? Hapticality, the touch of the undercommons, the interiority of sentiment, the feel that what is to come is here. Hapticality, the capacity to feel through others, to feel through you, for you to feel them feeling you. This feel of the shipwreck is not regulated, at least not successfully, by a state, a religion, a people, an empire, a piece of land, a totem. This is a sentence by two very interesting social theorists that are Fred Moten and Stefano Harney, in very beautiful book called The Undercommons. The undercommons are all the gestures and behavior that goes against the widespread paradigm of Western capitalistic and financial society. And Stefano Harney and Fred Moten also reflected on this experience of being apart, but with others. The fact that we have the possibility to develop a sociality that is not just physically presence, because what is tricky in the capitalistic society is that the capitalistic society eludes us, gives us the illusion, the impression that we are not alone, while we are instead completely alone. So the haptic approach is contact, but not in the sense of physical contact per se, but in the sense of being in presence, feeling the presence in the world, with the world. So feeling the interdependence, the fact that we are all one, as it is, or the fact that we are all connected. How can we relate this reflection to what we have experienced so far in these last 2 months about the virus? Well, one way to think about the haptic approach is breathing. Breathing is the most evident relational paradigm. Breathing is relation, and living as well as thinking is breathing. Thinking is taking a deep breath to draw strength and inspiration from your surroundings, an inhalation, a pause, and then an exhalation. It's a rhythm between the intakes and outgivings. It's a sort of mutual correspondence between our inner and the outer. So when I am in front of someone, we are exchanging our identities through breathing, through inspiration and exhalation. And so we see also what the virus can affect us, no? In this sense, how it is. So the idea of the mask that cover the mouth is very telling on from this point of view, because we put a sort of wall in front of our most important organ, that is an organ that is key for talking, for eating, and then for breathing. So the fact that we use a filter is very telling. But breathing is fundamental for understanding this kind of communality and interdependence in the sense of the haptic approach. So society is not just gathering people in a place or in a square, but is the continuous exchange of breathing in the air. The air is the condition of society. And as we are depending on air, we can feel the hapticality of our existence. You know very well that in the Eastern tradition, in Buddhism or in Taoism, breathing is the base of philosophy. The exercise of breathing are fundamental. And of course, in our Western modern society, in the capitalistic society, we took away the importance of breathing. And one of the consequences of this coronavirus in these last 2 months and the sentiment of loneliness that many people proved was anxiety. And what is anxiety? Anxiety comes from anxus, Latin word, ango, that means to choke, being without breath, not be able to breathe. So anxiety is this absence, the sentiment of this absence of good breathing. So we have to feel how air is fundamental and how air is made up by all the people that are the society. Coronavirus has given us the possibility to feel how much air inhalation and exhalation are fundamental. It's not just body touching. And so there are beautiful possibilities in the coronavirus as well as imminent risks in the sense of how we can face with it. Of course, we are very happy now that is going to finish, but we should not be we should not be we should not be persuaded that this will bring more awareness or more knowledge. It depends. The art of feeling through others and increase our sensibility requires something, requires an approach. And this approach, for example, is I can list some pros that comes from this approach. First of all, in these months, we maybe experienced how what we miss has value. The fact that we don't see people as we see often, of course, as this is a very classic topic, provides values to what we normally have very easily at hand. And so, for example, also very simple physical gestures like hugs and kisses and embraces that we normally give without any importance, they acquire a new importance and a new value. So this is something that we can get in a positive way. Another positive possibility for an haptic approach stemming from this situation is that we have learned to delegate less to others, or we should have learned to delegate less to others. And I'm thinking, for example, on cooking, the experience of cooking on our own. Restaurants were closed, canteens were closed, bars were closed. So people, was a very debated topics in these months. Everyone was cooking again, was making breads and pizza with artisanal flours and all these. So the idea that we could have learned to to give value to making food and to eat the food that we make. Another possible value of this sensibility, haptic sensibility in this time, is to that the physical distance from others could have increased the attention to ourselves, to the proximality with oneself. So sometimes people need the other, the company of the other, just to avoid the knowledge of the self, as you know, as we know, all know this very well. So this is something that could have been a positive effect of the situation. In general, there is this creativity that can stem from the necessity of changing style of life and mechanical rhythms to which we are normally accustomed without ever thinking of them. So these are some of the the possibilities. There is. I was thinking these days of this very beautiful poems by Charles Baudelaire. Now I share this with you. And it's very famous, Le Foule, Le Folle, from the Spleen de Paris, Spleen de Paris, 1869. Here you see the original French and English translation. Il n'est pas donné à chacun de prendre un bain de multitude. It is not given to every man to take a bath of multitude. Here, Baudelaire said, to be in the crowd is an art. Enjoying a crowd is an art. And only it can relish a debauch of vitality at the expense of the human spices, on whom in his cradle a fairy has bestowed the love of masks and masquerading, the hate of home and the passion for roaming. So here he takes the problem from the opposite side. To be in a crowd, to be in a multitude, can be an experience of knowing oneself if you have the art of enjoying a crowd, which is the opposite of what we are talking now. But if we read the two following lines, we also find that this is also true for our topic. Multitude, solitude, identical terms and interchangeable by the active and fertile poet. The man who is unable to people his solitude is equally unable to be alone in a bustling crowd. And this is the idea, no? So the haptic sensibility should be the sensibility that permits you to people his solitude, so to feel the others in a situation of solitude, as we should be able to be alone in a bustling crowd. And of course, to be able to do this, we need to increase this haptic sensibility, what I call this haptic sensibility. And I found this poem from Baudelaire very interesting. So to conclude this small preliminary ideas and suggestions about the sense of the distance and proximality in the light of the haptic approach stemming from the coronavirus experience, I would say that this we should be aware that distance, the concept of distance, should not be meant just as physical, for the reasons that we explain, but on the other hand, we should also be aware that society is not in a vacuum, is not in the void of minds and spirits. It is also material. It needs air, as I said. It needs the exchange of breathing. And so, to overcross the false opposition between physical presence and isolation, that are the two same coins of the financial and capitalistic Western society, the true point is to rethink materiality, to rethink the real problem of isolation. I can be isolated, I can be alone, both if I am in a crowd or in a single apartment. This is a false problem. The true problem is that society exists and there is nothing but society. But society is not connections of loneliness. It is rather the awareness of this interdependence and entanglement that I just exemplified through the example of air, but we can exemplify it also through the example of food, for example. And this awareness of interdependence, entanglement, and what we have also called the meshwork of lines, using the vocabulary of Tim Ingold and other authors, it is the very core, this awareness of this haptic approach. Haptic approach is an education to such an awareness and wisdom that highlights the fact that we always have to care the others. We always are affected by others, whatever we know it or not. If we know it, if we are aware of it, we can feel our responsibility much better. And so, from this point of view, I have not been too much concerned and worried, about these problems caused by the fact that I had to stay in my room, in my apartment for 2 months, because I have tried to work with others, not just through Skype and through Blackboard and through Zoom, but through the feeling of the others feeling me. And I think this is what an haptic approach is supposed to do. And the haptic approach is to provide something that helps us to provide a tool to be able to put together contemplation, observations without individuality and without the sense of loneliness in the meaning that I explained before. We can be apart without being alone. And this is the final meaning of the haptic approach that I wanted to share with you today. So, thank you very much for your kind attention. I have finished my presentation. I speak 45 minutes, so 42 minutes. So I am in time. I was quite right on time, and now I am happy to make a dive, to answer some questions or to listen to your observations and comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicola. It was very interesting. And
Grazie.
I think there will be, yes, any questions by... You don't see that, but our rector was here.
Ah, sì? Oh.
Yes.
Meno male.
Then...
Sono contento. Grazie.
Chi vuole cominciare?
Prego.
Okay, I can maybe break the ice. So thank you very much for the fascinating talk. I mean, there is something that maybe is not very clear to me, and that is maybe aside your thinking. So, and this has to do with relations between the ideas of sociality and the body. So when we think of the differences that you mentioned between physical distancing and social distancing, which of course, I mean, there are differences. Yeah, I wonder if what we really need to do, or what this period is asking us to do, is basically to rethink ideas of sociality. And because I mean, what is society without our bodies? And of course, yeah, the air is something that we definitely share, and that yeah, it makes us humans, and it makes us living. But we are, society is also made of yeah, bodies somehow. So when we speak of social distancing, and we make this distinction with physical, so this distinction is something that is not very clear to me. So maybe you want to, I don't know, if you have any.
Yes, thank you. I understand your question, and of course, it's a good question. And as I said, what society is everything, but what I don't accept in this idea of bodies, it is that at the end of the day, it is a dualistic idea that divide the bodies from something else. I accept the theories of the extended mind and extended being. I don't know where my body finish and where other bodies start. So the idea that society needs physical body, yes, of course, but what is a physical body? It's just my flesh, it's just my bones. I think this is a very impositive way of putting things, and it is also legitimate, but I can also express part of my body in different devices that are not what I represent normally as my body. So my hands, my flesh, my bones, and I can, well, I mean, my body is not confined into my shape, as my mind is not confined into my brain. And so I agree with the fact that, as I told in the conference, we have to rethink a different idea of materiality. If we remain attached to, I think it's legitimate, and with affection, to the idea of our body, my body, this is my body, and this is me with my body, I think that we don't go too far into this elaboration of a different way of sociality and a different way of materiality, and the idea that there is a body different from a mind and my body different from your body. At the end, I see this as an individualistic idea, and also an idea of property. That I have my body and the rights of my body, and so I try to think, shifting from this paradigm to a paradigm in which these distinctions are not operating anymore. And the hapticality for me is this sentiment, is this feeling that between my body and your body, and the fact that we are now in this context, now we are, there is a screen, and this screen is part of my body as it is part of your body. I don't want to make a separation just because, oh, we are talking, but we are not physically present because our body are not present. I understand the point, of course, and it would be very easy to say that you are right. We are not physically in presence, and there are you, and there is me, and we are separated by a screen. But at the same time, I try to find a creative possibility in which, even if in this moment, we are not separate by a machine, but this is also it's a prosthesis of our body. And yeah, that's it. I'm not, of course, these are ideas that I am developing. It's nothing certain, it's not sure, it's nothing elaborated, but this is the direction that I want to take. Non so se è stata chiara la risposta rispetto alla domanda.
It was great. It was a great answer, actually. Yeah, I have a short answer, but I will wait if there are other people. I will, yeah.
Sì. Yes, please.
Good evening, Professor.
Good evening, Khalid. Yes, please.
Professor,
can I see you? Can I see your body as your face?
Yeah, of course.
I'm not so creative. That creative that I imagine your face without. Okay, now I see you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, Professor. Yeah, I just have a question. You mentioned earlier that you know, there's a difference between being alone and feeling alone, and it just reminded me of something I read, that solitude can be the best companion that some people can have. So, like, my question is, like, what makes different humans react to isolation differently? For some people, solitude can be therapeutic, while others, it might, like you mentioned earlier, it might bring anxiety and fear of solitude. So what is it about the individual qualities that different people react differently?
Yes, exactly. It depends on many. You touch a very important point. I hope, as I told in the talk, that some people took this experience as an experiment to perceive themselves in a different way, and to appreciate a certain way of being apart without being alone. People react differently according to many different factors. Of course, first of all, there are cultural differences and historical and geographical differences. As you know, in other places on Earth, people are much more used to spend time alone or to speak less, to spend less time with others. Because the problem is, and this is also something that returns to the question from Paolo, if all these physical contacts and physical presence of bodies would have provided a higher level of happiness, I would agree on the fact that this is key for a better life. But it's not, I don't have to be a very important sociologist to remind that this is not the case. Sometimes physical presence is just an astonishing device to make people less aware. It's like a kind of drug, a kind of socialization in the Western society, the idea of, I mean, I have nothing against, of course, restaurants, conviviality, bars in this sense, of course. I love them, I'm happy with them, but at the same time, I see how these places of the so-called conviviality sometimes has become places for that answer to other needs that are not being more human and being more social, but exactly the opposite. So there are cultural differences, there are historical differences, and then, Khalid, there are also biographical differences, biographical and psychological different reactions that are given to the fact that we are all different. People that are stronger in character, people that need to talk less than other people, people that don't need to, that they feel more, the people that feel more sure about their being, or people that need this kind of interaction. I mean, interaction is not good, not bad per se. This is the idea. It depends on how we conduct this interaction, which is not just physical. It can also be mental interaction. Also, mental interaction can be good or bad. We can influence in a very negative way people with our minds, of course. So this is the point. I'm not making this speech in praise of eremitism or solitude. I want to warn you about that. I think that in our society, in the very moment that we are living, some more eremitism could be good because of what we have become in our Western society. So this is what, and of course, as it is good, as it is, can be very useful, it is also very hard. It is also very difficult. It's like when you don't exercise your muscles anymore for years and years, and then when you have to exercise these muscles at the beginning, it hurts. It hurts very much. But sometimes this kind of hurt can be useful. Can be useful if you exercise the muscles in a proper way. Of course, can also you can also break your legs or your muscles if you do it in a bad way. But if you do it in a good way, can be useful. Yes, please, Camilla Bondioli.
Hello.
Hi.
Again, about the body.
Yeah.
Since when we socialize, we make a great use of body language.
Yes.
Instead, in this new form, it is extremely penalized because we tend to be static, sitting on a chair, on a sofa, and we are framed half bust or in a close-up. And so we can see our facial expressions maybe, but we cannot capture the complex of body language. So doesn't this make sociality incomplete?
Yes, in one sense it is. In one sense, this is true. But in the other sense, you can increase when you have physical proximality, you don't mind. For example, let's think of the Lettere dal carcere di Gramsci, the letters from the jail from Antonio Gramsci, or imagine that you are in jail and that you have to find a way to communicate your love to the absent. And you start to write thousands of wonderful letters that are not just love letters, that are also letters about politics, about philosophy, about life. And this was possible because Gramsci was in jail. I mean, I'm not saying that he was happy to be in jail because he could write the letter, but as he was there, he found a way to communicate in a very intense way with the outer. So he was totally connected to the society. It was not that because of the fact that it was alone in a jail, he was out of the society. He gave a wonderful contribution to the society, even if this way. So, I mean, we should also see this from this point of view. See, if someone is blind, as you know, has this deprivation of this sense of sight, the blind people increase the perception through other channels, no? So of course it is an incomplete, but I don't think that the fact that you meet someone in a bar or in a disco or if you hang out with someone in a restaurant makes this a complete form of socialization, because it can be very superficial and you can ignore a lot of elements of communication. Maybe you may have some body communication, gesture communication, but you miss these other facets of communication. So attention and intensity and sensibility are keys, more than just the setting, I mean. So, yeah, I don't think that exists a form of complete a priori and prefixed way of socialize. When I was doing the meeting in Società Gastronomica, now we are making the course of epistemology online these days. And in the previous years, I made the courses in Società Gastronomica, and some of the students that came there were totally absent, and they were totally out of the situation. some no, some that were totally. So it was not that because they were physically present, they were present with their being. So it depends.
Maybe I will jump in again, following Camilla's question, because yeah, I was thinking to what you said, and yeah, I mean, I think that the answer was clear, and actually it made me think a lot, because I always thought that we are not confined within our shell, within our shape, as you said. So maybe, and maybe my question was not very well placed. But the point that makes me wonder really is the role of performance in our so the role of performance in constructing society. So and this of course follows what Camilla was saying, no? So okay, gesture, but the body seen as a medium for performance. Not, this is something that makes me think a lot. Yeah.
Yes,
so this
yes,
was
yes.
my...
But, no, but I'm not. Haptic approach is not something that say that is better to be at home alone, so we can think about ourselves better. I mean, the only point is this: to put it, we have been, I think, we are too much exposed to some kind of stimulation that sometimes are really functional to the system that we say that is bad. So this kind of sociality, of tourism, of traveling, of making this kind of exchanges. So we have been too much exposed to this, no? Going outside every day, whatever. And I think that maybe we can take the advantage to balance this with what we have lost, what we have missed. Contemplation, the idea of being apart but connected, the idea of course, this is not permanent. I mean, if we would lose the freedom of traveling, of the freedom of perform in a physical sense, this would be a damage, would be something really a disaster. But what I cannot, well, what I want to suggest that 2 or 3 months of changing of this kind of behavior and rhythms and habitudes and habits is not per se a loss, because just we should try to rebalance. For example, let's take education, no? The so famous online teaching. Everyone is saying that online teaching is bad, that we have to be together, that we have to be in the same place, that we have, okay, I agree. But as it has been noted by Stefano and Fred, they notice a very interesting point, that online teaching, on the other hand, is very democratic. It breaks down the hierarchies between the rich and the poor, people that can afford to attend a university or a place in physical presence, and people that cannot. So the experience of online teaching, of course, it is an experience of decreasing, of lowering. We are lowering, but at the same time, it's also a challenge because we are all on the same level. And this is true especially for American students in the American big famous university, and the difference. So it's I'm not talking of Italy, only of Italy, but our. So let's take this situation and this contingency as a possibility to think about these things, not in a univocal way. We never think of the fact that we are very privileged to go to discos, to restaurants, and to campus every day or on a weekly basis, the biggest part of society cannot afford this. So we can, in somehow, try to empathically enter into other ways also of being. I think this is a kind of socialization. And this is a way to socialize and to empathize with people that that don't see this as a great change, because it is what they normally do, to stay at home, to live their life in a very narrow way, not to travel, eating at home without going outside, etc., etc., etc. It's provocative, I know, but it's not because I like this. I think that I want to just give this as a suggestion.